let me know when there are questions in the chat, or if anyone has a question, feel free to ask. I can't see any of you, unfortunately, while I'm presenting, but I know you're there, and I'm grateful for all of your time. So I will go ahead and get started. Okay, so today we're going to be discussing protecting your identity and money while avoiding scams. And the first thing we'll do is review a slide that I've shared in the past, because I think all of this bears repeating. And that is that there are many scams and a lot of fraud related to the pandemic and stimulus payments. And that the government will never email, call, or text you to ask for your account numbers or any personal information of any kind. There's a website from the IRS that specifies information related to the stimulus payment. And don't give out any of your financial or personal information by phone, text, or email. Contact organizations that you trust directly. If you're not sure it's them, don't click on any links or hang up, or don't engage via text or social media. As I've mentioned, scammers will often mask their phone numbers and email addresses to make them look legitimate when they are not. They are professionals. They are very good at what they do. And a lot of these might sound really, really obvious. I know when I hear some of this stuff, I'm like, well, who falls for this stuff? But people do. I recently got something in the mail that was very, very convincing, and I called the number, and then I hung up right away and was like, wait, this is an urgent notice that is out of the blue. I don't think the DMV would be sending you something like this. And I thought about it, and it turns out it was a scam. So it can really happen to anyone. So just take a moment to think through what it might be, determine if it's legitimate. If you are a victim of fraud or receive an attempt like that, definitely report it. That is so helpful. The Colorado Attorney General's office has a great website called Stop Fraud Colorado that also includes a lot of common frauds and schemes that are going on. But it's great to report those things, because then someone else doesn't have to become victim to it. There are a lot of scam prevention tips and that you can find on the FTC federal website, the Federal Trade Commission as well. So coronavirus scams can take many different forms. Again, you might get a text, email, call. Some of you have probably received these. I know I have. Ignore online offers for vaccinations. Be very wary of test kits. There are many, many robocalls out there, and some, again, are very convincing. They might say they're contact tracers. They might say that they are from Social Security or the IRS or your credit union or bank. Just be very, very careful. And emails claiming to be from the CDC or the World Health Organization. And if you are donating to relief efforts, whether it's related to COVID-19 or not, do a little homework, look at the Better Business Bureau, make sure that the charity is legitimate, that it's actually taking you to a legitimate website so that your donation goes where you intend it to be. Unfortunately, during a crisis, scammers are more active than ever. They really prey on people. So it's good to avoid getting into a personal crisis with a scam or some fraud during this time. Okay, and this is related to something that has been happening increasingly. I would like you to think about this. Is it safe to send money up front for a job opportunity? So if you see a job opportunity listed online on, let's say, jobbing.com or Craigslist or any legitimate job website, and you might have guessed false. It's a scam. This is a very, very common scam, and they are found on real job search websites. So they're on LinkedIn, they're on Jobbing, they're on Craigslist, which tends to have more scams than some other platforms. So these are very, very common. Signs of a job scam is that you need to pay to get the job, like pay for training, pay for a uniform beforehand, or just pay, for a background check or a credit check. A legitimate employer will not require any of that of you. You have to supply your credit card or bank account information. Again, no. When you are hired, if you are setting up direct deposit, you may need to share your banking information, but you would not do that until after you've been hired and onboarded. And then a lot of common language we're seeing lately, a common tactic is that the ad says it's for a previously undisclosed federal job that pays very well. There are more and more remote work from home opportunities out there, which is great, but some of them can be fraudulent, as can job listings for jobs that are in person as well. So here's some other signs of scams and fraud to watch out for. Again, it can be really convincing, easy to fall for when we let our guard down. Scammers are professionals, are constantly improving their tactics, how legitimate their emails, texts, and calls appear. And sometimes they will use information they already have about you for phishing, right? So they might already have your address or your phone number or your date of birth or know where you work, and use some of that information to make the scam seem really, really convincing. And that's typically how we fall for them, right? Is they already have some key piece of information about us or our family or a debt that we have, and we assume that it's legitimate. So there's usually a sense of urgency to a scam or fraud. You have to act now, you have to act right away. There's a timeline, a deadline. You're being asked for personal or banking information. And again, if they already have, let's say, your date of birth, your address, your employer, they might just need a couple other key pieces of information to fully steal your identity. If you're navigating online from your phone or a computer, a website is secure if it has an S at the end of HTTP. The S represents secure. It's really important. Do not log into any website, provide your financial, card information, anything like that, unless you see that S there. If you are being requested to pay a debt that you are unaware of or aware of, I would be very careful. So again, they might know where you do your banking because your credit report was compromised. And they might say that you owe money and you need to pay it to them and not the bank or the credit union. Be very, very careful. And also with debts that you're not familiar with. I've had this happen where I was told, oh, well, you owe this medical debt or you owe this debt that I had no familiarity with. I started to panic because I am in the process of trying to buy a home. And, if I hadn't taken a step back to think about it, I probably would have just paid it because I didn't want my credit to be damaged. So think through those things, do a little research, make sure that they're legitimate and that you owe them. Or if you're receiving an email from an address that looks suspicious or that you don't recognize, requesting that you click on a link. Sometimes the link will look legitimate. It'll look like it's coming from your financial institution or utility company, but there's just a little bit that's off about it, some typos, or it's asking you to provide your username and password or something that is just off. So if you're unsure, call that company directly at a number that's on your statement, or if it's a financial company, the number that's on the back of your debit or credit card. Other common scams that have been happening lately are cryptocurrency scams. So an example of cryptocurrency would be Bitcoin. And recently there were some high-profile Twitter accounts that were hacked by scammers asking people to send money using Bitcoin. And surprisingly, many people sent money. Scammers were able to steal over $100,000 from 300 people. And it's important to note that, you might see that and be like, well, I wouldn't believe that, Barack Obama is going to send double my money back to me, or Warren Buffett. But, sometimes they are convincing. It'll say like, we'll double your money for a donation or something like that. So just be very, very vigilant and careful, whether it's someone you know or somebody you don't. If something seems out of the ordinary, take notice and think about it before you act. And it's also important to note that cyber criminals will hack organizations, not just individuals, including financial institutions, to ask you via email, text, or social media to send money, make payments, have your money doubled, or earn free money. Wouldn't that be nice if we could earn some free money? So again, just be very careful. It's an increasingly common scam that's out there. And again, if there is a guarantee that you will make money quickly right away, it's a scam. If you're told that your money will be doubled right away within 48 hours, also a scam. And that if you'll get free money, whether in dollars, Bitcoin, no. I wish there was a way for us to get some free money easily. Wouldn't that be nice? But these are very, very common and effective scams, frankly. They get changed up all the time. Okay, so we've talked about scams, and something I hear a lot is, well, what's the difference between being scammed and being a victim of identity theft? It's a little different. They can overlap and be similar, but I think it's worth noting what identity theft is. So identity theft is when someone steals your personal information. It can be your name, social security number, card number, date of birth, any identifying information about you. And they use that information without your permission to commit fraud or other crimes. So it could be they apply for a job in your name using your social, or a loan or a utility, or they get medical care. They apply for your tax refund. That's very common, unfortunately. So it can take many forms. And it can really be damaging to your finances, credit history, and other aspects. And how does it happen? Again, identity thieves, scammers are always coming up with novel and new ways to get information and to steal it. So it might be from good old-fashioned trash, right? So be very, very careful about what you put in your trash and recycling. Ideally, get a double cross shredder or take it to a business that has one. Libraries, banks, credit unions oftentimes will offer to shred sensitive documents for you. So anything like your banking statement, I would not put in the trash. Someone will know where you do your banking, might try to pretend to be you and put pieces together. Anything with your personal or financial information, you want to be really careful about. It could also be stolen from a business. So if there's a data breach, whether it's Equifax or Target or the federal government's Office of Personnel Management, when a breach happens, thieves are able to get different information about you and use it for fraud. They might trick you into revealing information. So at my workplace, we are tested constantly on things like this. So somebody will call and say that, they're a contractor and they need to do work and ask for information about one of our colleagues. Or somebody might try to get into the building to do some and say that they're there for a legitimate purpose, which they are not. There are many, many different ways. Sometimes people will just call and ask questions and say, oh, you're related to so-and-so. I just wanted to surprise them. I mean, there are just infinite amount of scams out there that will trick people and convince them into revealing information to steal their identity. It can be as simple as having your wallet or purse stolen or having something taken out of it. I once worked with a young man who was in his mid-20s who had his social security card in his wallet when he was 16 years old. It was stolen, and his identity was stolen over and over and over. It was sold on the dark web, and it was frankly a nightmare for him. There are some things that can be done. There are very few people that need an attorney to help with identity theft or disputing incorrect information on credit reports. He was one of them because he just had such an intense case of that. And so the point I'm trying to make there is, please do not carry your social security number around. If you're a member of a credit union or a bank, don't carry around, blank checks or what your member number is. Be very, very careful. That social security number, ideally just memorize it and never carry it with you. Don't use it as the end of a password or the last 4 digits for any password or PIN, because that number is really, really important to safeguard and is the easiest way to steal your identity and compromise your information. And again, identity thieves might offer you a job, loan, or apartment in order to get your information and then not deliver on those things. Because we do usually have to provide quite a bit of information on a job application, loan application, or apartment application. So here's some red flags that someone has experienced identity theft. Once identity thieves have your personal information, they can drain financial accounts, rack up charges on new credit cards, open utility accounts, get tax refunds in your name, even medical treatment on your health insurance. So I've had people tell me, well, like, my medical record number and insurance card isn't that important. You know, when I get a new one, I just throw it in the trash. There's a lot of fraud around medical stuff. Medical care is expensive, as many of you know. So that is something that's targeted. So here are things I might notice if I were a victim of identity theft. So mistakes on my accounts, statements, or medical benefits billing. Really important to review your statements from any provider that you receive to make sure that everything is accurate. You don't receive bills or other mail. This can happen because somebody updated your address and has been racking up charges in your name, but having the mail delivered somewhere else. So if you ordered a debit or credit card and it never arrived in the mail, or you went to the hospital and you never got the bill and you're wondering why, those would be good reasons to follow up with those providers and figure out what's going on. If you see withdrawals from your account that you don't recognize, and sometimes these are not big withdrawals. So a lot of the time, identity thieves will make really small withdrawals from your accounts or charges onto a credit card to see if you're paying attention and to see if there's money in there, and then they will just drain the account. So you really want to be vigilant about what's going on with your accounts. Calls from debt collectors for debts that are not yours. Again, that could be a scam, so you want to be careful, but if it is legitimate, it could be that somebody racked up debt in your name. A notice from the IRS by mail. Legitimate notices and communication from the IRS will always come by mail. They will never call you, text you, email you. But if you get something from the IRS saying you owe a bunch of taxes, or there was a problem with your tax refund or your tax return and you haven't filed your taxes yet, that would be a red flag. And calls or mail about accounts in your minor child's name. So I know this was mentioned with regards to a question during the credit class. And if somebody is a minor, so under the age of 18, legally they cannot have any debt in their name. So no loans in their name. But identity thieves find a way around that somehow. I once worked with a woman whose baby, I think it was like a 9-month-old baby, if I recall correctly, had $30,000 of credit card debt. I assure you, nobody gave that baby a credit card, right? So it was an identity thief who was able to get their hands on the social security number and drain that account. One of the resources that you'll be sent is specifically about child identity theft and steps to take. If you're unsure if your child has been a victim of identity theft, or you just want to make sure everything is normal, you can try to pull their credit reports on the same website you would pull your own, that annualcreditreport.com. And you should get something that says, no record, no report, something like that. That's a good thing. If there is a record of loans and things in their name, that would be a cause for concern. And some of these I've mentioned, but there are many, many misuses that can result from identity theft. So I've mentioned all of these examples of misuses, but what is the impact it can have? If somebody takes out debt in your name and they don't pay it back, obviously, right? That's why they're stealing your information to do it, is so they don't have to pay it back. You might not qualify for credit or a loan that you need because of that. You might be refused public benefits or medical care, be contacted by a lot of debt collectors, experience lawsuits, and then just the time and expense spent on recovery steps. So there are ways to recover from identity theft, but it does take time, a lot of time and effort, and following up to make sure that everything is done correctly and that all of that is fixed. You have to fill out a police report. So the best way to minimize it is to just take steps to mitigate it from happening, right? So take steps to reduce the likelihood of identity theft happening to you. You could take every step in the world, unfortunately, and be very precautious and still be impacted, for example, by a data breach, which was by no fault of your own. It was a business that was hacked, but do the best that you can, because it's really not fun having to deal with recovering from identity theft. And so we'll talk about some ways to reduce your risk, and I'll just pause to see, Daniel, have there been any questions? Does anyone have any comments? I'm happy to address them.
I was just gonna say.
Go ahead, Kareem.
Oh, I was just gonna say for a comment really quick. When you were talking about that person who had left his social security card in his wallet, I've had a really bad habit of like keeping my social security card in my wallet, even though I memorized it. So when you started talking about that, like that was the final push to just take it out and to put it in a secure spot. I mean, I've moved around and been homeless, so I think there was a sort of insecurity about like, where do I put like my most valuable documents? But now that I feel more secure, just hearing you, I was just like, let me put this away so that doesn't happen.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's such a great piece of feedback. It's so important. And you're right. I mean, when we're moving around, it's a number you need all the time. And if you're in between housing, sure, you want to keep it on your person so that you can safeguard it. But a lot could happen with it. And that said, if anyone ever knows that their social security number was compromised or your wallet was stolen, the best thing to do is report it to the Social Security Administration, SSA, right away before any bad things happen. That way they can alert it. I've seen situations where they were able to issue new social security numbers. Usually that's not unless somebody really experiences bad identity theft. Also, the SSA is very backed up because it has not been open since March. But yeah, that's a great piece of feedback. And it's not just social security numbers. People carry around all kinds of things. So unless you are planning on paying for a lot of things with checks while you're out for the day, I would not carry around your checkbook that has your account number, your routing number, everything somebody needs to drain your checking or savings account. And we just tend to carry a lot of that. I work with a lot of people. I finally got my mom, and I encourage a lot of people to do this, not just my mom, to set up a secure password manager. So there are free apps you can get on your phone or websites you can use online where you remember one really complex password that you make for yourself, and you can put all of your passwords in there to all of your financial websites and really any website that you need a username and password to. It'll even auto-generate passwords for you to make them really complex, depending on what the requirements are for a specific app or website. I visited my mom a couple years ago, and she just had like all of her passwords just written out on a piece of paper and was like carrying them around in her purse in case she needed to log in from her phone somewhere. And I was like, Mom, that's like a great way to completely steal every piece of personal information about you. So please don't do that. It can be tempting. I know I struggle with passwords. There's so many passwords we have to remember. You can always reset them if you need to. It's a hassle, but better than having your information compromised. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this wasn't really a scam, although it's a bit dishonest, but I was registering a car recently. Yeah. And I just, I Googled Denver DMV, and I just clicked on the first link that looked like the DMV. And turns out it wasn't the DMV. And I went through the whole process. I'd entered my credit card information. I'd done all this stuff, and I believe it was legit in that they were going to register my car for me, but they were going to charge me an excessive fee to do it. And when I realized what the fee was, I was like, well, this isn't right. And I started looking more carefully, and I realized I wasn't even on the DMV website. So wow. It is painfully easy to get drawn down the wrong path.
Yeah, yes, that's a great example, Kevin. Thank you for sharing. I've heard that experience from many people. There are certain public records that scammers can get their hands on really easily too. So in this case, it was a Google search that went somewhere, and there are quote unquote legitimate businesses that will process your registration, for example, but charge you a fee that you would not get by going directly to the state of Colorado's DMV,
exactly.
for example. But also I've had situations where people will buy a car. So there's a public record of, the VIN number, that kind of thing, the transaction. And then they'll suddenly start getting things in the mail that are like, oh, your warranty is going to expire, that you need to pay for this, or you need to register here right away, on fraudulent websites that do not process your registration. So it can be really hard to be able to tell the difference between what's legitimate and what isn't, again, because these are professionals and businesses. That's what they do for a living. So in order for them to be successful, they have to be convincing. So yeah, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing. So, even if your identity has not been stolen or you have not experienced fraud, there are always things that you can do to reduce your risk. Make these ideas and suggestions a part of your routine to monitor your accounts and treat your personal information with care. Make it into a habit, like you would buckling your seatbelt or locking your doors at night. So keep your important papers secure. Again, use a shredder, cross shredder, or take it somewhere that will shred documents for you. A legitimate place. You don't want to just take it anywhere because they might be able to look into your documents. Be very careful with your mail. Again, what you throw out. If you move, definitely forward your mail. That's a really easy way to make sure that your mail with sensitive information is not getting into the hands of whoever moved in after you moved out. I've lived in my current apartment at least 5 years, maybe 6 now, and I get mail from the person who lived here before me and 3 tenants before that. I've gotten credit card offers. I've gotten speeding tickets because somebody didn't update their information with the DMV. I've gotten just all kinds of stuff. And if I filled out the credit card application that came to me that was in someone else's name, I probably would have gotten a credit card mailed back to me and been able to fraudulently use it. So that's a really easy way to have your identity stolen. If you go to the USPS, US Postal Service website, it costs $1 online, and they will forward your mail for 6 months to your new address. There'll be a yellow sticker that's on all of your mail where the sender does not have your updated mailing address, and that's a cue to you to go to those companies and update it with them. The last time I moved, I just made a list of everywhere I needed to update my address with, including the HR at my job, the financial institutions, health insurance, things like that. And it's been really easy since because I can just consult with that if any of my information changes. But yeah, mail is a big one. Again, shredding documents, avoiding oversharing on social networking sites. So people share a lot of information on social media, and everyone has different comfort levels. But for example, if you are going to be out of town, you might want to post about your trip after you get back, not broadcasting that your house is going to be empty or your apartment's going to be empty. That could be a target for robbery. I've seen less of this lately, but people will geotag where they are. So you can see exactly where somebody lives, and they might be, doing live videos and you can see the layout of their house. Again, really good staking opportunity for somebody who wants to rob that person. And sometimes there are things that I don't even think to warn people about. There was this fad a few years ago where young people were posting pictures with their first paycheck, which is great, but it had the full paycheck that included sometimes their social security numbers on the stub, their date of birth, their address, everything you need to steal your identity. So just be careful about what you share. And again, don't write down your PINs or usernames or passwords, places. Use a secure way to save those so that they're not easy targets. And be alert to impersonators. Again, these can be online, through text, social media. Do you know who's getting your personal information? Really important to think about. And contact customer service if you're not sure, again, at a number that you know is legitimate. So we've talked a lot about credit over the course of this series, but it bears repeating that monitoring your credit reports for suspicious accounts or activities, those inquiries that we talked about during the credit class, somebody applying for credit or pulling your credit would be a red flag. And reading your banking, credit, and account statements and your explanation of medical benefits. So look for charges you didn't make or services you didn't receive from a medical provider. Be alert for bills that don't arrive when you expect them, and follow up if you get account statements for things that you don't recognize. And protecting your devices. So this is really important, whether it's a smartphone or a computer that you have, to use antivirus, firewall, spyware, create strong passwords. I know this isn't fun. I have to have so many passwords at work and in my personal life, and making them really secure and remembering them can be a challenge. Again, you can use an app or website that encrypts your passwords. That's a legitimate website to save them. So you just have to remember one really strong password, and then it'll unlock the others for you. Keep your computer or phone's operating system, browser, and security up to date. So when they do updates, a lot of the time there are security patches and things like that that are intended to protect you. Be careful about what you send, particularly via email. I think a lot of us communicate by email more and more, but don't send sensitive documents over your email. So I wouldn't even send a credit report by email to myself. I used to save things by emailing them to myself. That is not something I would recommend, emailing to yourself to save it. Just be careful about what you're sharing. For example, you know, I've been helping my mom with some estate planning things since my dad passed away earlier this year. And if she needs my, you know, the last 4 of my social or my date of birth, I never email or text it to her. I call her and make sure that she's home, there's no one around, I'm not on speaker, and then give her that information. So just be careful, again, because if your information is hacked, it's really easy to put all those pieces together. Be wise about Wi-Fi. So if you're using a public Wi-Fi network where everyone shares the same password, who's not within your household or people that you know, or just an open network with no password at all, you have to operate as though somebody is looking over your shoulder and watching everything you're doing while you're on that Wi-Fi network, because that's exactly what a hacker is able to do. So I would not log into your mobile or online banking, access any sensitive information, email anything sensitive. Just be very careful. It's really tempting to always connect to free Wi-Fi networks when we're out and about. I do it too, but I just don't access anything that requires a password or includes any sensitive information. Password protect your computer as well as your phone. That's just an easy way to add an additional barrier to people accessing your personal information. And then when you're online, whether you're on your phone or any other device, only shop or enter your sensitive information, usernames, passwords, to any website on sites that include that S, HTTPS, meaning that it's a secure website.
Okay, something else I wanted to mention, I hate to back up, but having somebody with a similar name, they will.
Yes.
They called me a few years back, quite a few years back now, about someone who had a hospital bill, had the same name as my son.
Mm-hmm.
But I asked them questions, asking them what social security number are you using for this bill, because you should have that information. I know the person by his name. So when they gave me the social security number, it turned out, and I did owe something for my son's hospital bill, but it turned out that 80% of what they wanted me to pay was under another person by that same name.
Wow.
I ended up paying like $40-something instead of $600 and some odd dollars.
Yeah, that's a great example.
You have to turn around and ask them questions sometimes to verify what it is they're basing their allegations on.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good example. And you took the time to do that, right? Some people would just pay it and not ask questions, but it's really, really important to ask questions and make sure that you owe the money that you're being told that you owe. It can be a hassle. It can take quite a few phone calls. I think I've mentioned this in a past class that I had a medical bill for $70. I knew it was supposed to be covered in full by insurance. If I just ignored it, it would have eventually gone to collections and hurt my credit. It took, I think, like 6 or 7 phone calls, no exaggeration, to get that bill fixed, right? And speak to a manager and follow up every week, which was not fun and not what I wanted to do after my work day. But it paid off because I didn't owe it. I knew I didn't owe it. But unfortunately, even when we are not in the wrong, it can come back to damage our credit, or take even more time to correct later on if it ends up going to collections or showing up as a debt that we owe. So I give you a lot of credit for doing that, because a lot of people wouldn't take the time to ask those questions.
Well, it came to mind, and I always go on the premise that everybody has a boss. If you're not satisfied with the answer that you get from that person insisting that this is yours, ask them to speak to their boss.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a boss.
Yeah, I agree. And
until you get that satisfaction, because I knew that wasn't right.
Right. And your instinct kicked in, and, a lot of incorrect billing, some of it is instinct, some of it is you just have to listen to your gut, frankly, if something doesn't sound right to you. And medical billing in particular can be really hard to figure out, but every medical provider, Kaiser, for example, where I have health insurance, has a financial counseling line, and they're actually quite helpful. I call them almost every time I get a bill and make sure that I was billed correctly. I hit my deductible recently. Did this take that into account? Why is this only covering this percentage of this when my insurance says I only have to pay 20%? Stuff like that. So it's not fun. I have 2 financial counseling certifications, but medical billing is not my expertise by any means. And it's really complicated. And there have been situations where I've been on the phone for 45 minutes where they're talking to their supervisor to even try to figure out my bill. So how am I supposed to figure it out on my own, right? So yeah, it can just be a matter of persistence. And again, asking to speak with a manager or supervisor if somebody doesn't know. So yeah, that's a very good example. Thank you again for sharing. Anyone else have any comments or anything they'd like to share before we move forward? Okay. So alerts, direct deposit, and e-payments. I highly recommend, if you have a banking relationship with a credit union, bank, credit card, to sign up for account alerts. Different financial institutions will provide you with different options to notify you about suspicious activity. So for me, I get a text and I get an email right away. Sometimes they're also just in your mobile app. It'll pop up as a notification from your app. Some are immediate. Some there's a delay and it'll let you know the following morning. And in some cases, you can specify, even if the credit union or bank doesn't think it's suspicious, you can adjust things so that if something is suspicious to you. So for me, if there's a transaction over a certain dollar amount, I get an alert. And if it's me, that's just fine. I just get the alert and I know that I spent over a certain amount that would be suspicious. If my account drops below a certain amount, I get an alert. With my credit cards, if I hit a certain dollar amount, I get an alert because I don't want to go over 10 or 30% of my limit, depending on what my goals are with my credit score. So there are a lot of alerts that you can set up for yourself so that you're not constantly having to go in and check yourself. Using bill pay, it might be called different things, different places. E-payment, electronic payments is really helpful as opposed to mailing a check. Mail, as I'm sure you know and have heard and maybe experienced firsthand, has been delayed lately. So there have been situations where people's bills are being counted as paid late, even if someone sends it well in advance. I know when I send something in the mail, I usually just put it in a blue box. I don't necessarily get a receipt at the post office that it was mailed on a certain day. So those electronic payments tend to be more secure and more instant. And then depositing paychecks, you can do that from your phone with most financial institutions. Social Security payments, tax refunds, getting those by direct deposit is a really, really good way to avoid experiencing identity theft or having those checks stolen from the mail. It is a felony to steal people's mail, but people do it. And the checks from Social Security tax refunds can be pretty easy to identify if you know what you're looking for. There isn't a lot on the envelope. It's a certain font, that kind of thing. In fact, this year I received a W-2 for the person who lived in my apartment at least 7 or 8 years ago. It had their Social Security number. It had everything I needed. And I could have used it to fill out a tax return in their name, and I would have gotten their tax refund mailed directly to me. So that's really important. And you also tend to get your payments faster, whether it's a tax refund or Social Security, if you set it up through direct deposit. And this is an example of what a card control can look like. So it looks a little different with different financial institutions, but this is super, super helpful, and they take effect instantly. So right away, it can be for a credit card, a debit card, a clear card, which is what we call like a prepaid debit card, kind of works like a gift card. It might be called different things, different places, but you can just turn your card on or off. So for me, if I am like, oh man, I know I put my debit card in a pocket or in a different bag and I can't find it right this second, I'll just turn it off. I don't know for sure that it was lost or stolen, right? But if I don't find it, nobody else can use that card. You'll want to be mindful, though, that with a credit or debit card, if you do that and you have an automatic payment that was scheduled, for example, if my Netflix bill was going to go through tomorrow, it would not go through if that card was turned off. If it was tied to my checking account, routing number, and account number, it would still go through. This is a really, really helpful device. I've also seen this with parents, if they give their child a card and they're like, okay, like you can just use it for this one thing, just to get, gas or just to go to the movies. And then once they see that transaction go through, they just turn the card off so they can't use it anymore. Don't recommend giving your card to children or friends or family or anyone if you're not there. But I know that does happen. So these card controls can be really helpful to just turn them on and off as you need them. And then avoiding getting scammed. So this is just a recap, but I mention these because we see this a lot in financial institutions and businesses in general. Don't share your online mobile banking password, login, a one-time code, your Social Security number or your PIN, and don't call back the number on your caller ID because that can be a fraudulent number. Again, sometimes company or scammers will mask companies' phone numbers to make it look like the legitimate number. But if you call that main number that's on the back of your debit or credit card or listed on the legitimate website of the business, it will go to that business. Number masking just works one way. It'll appear one way, like they're wearing a mask coming through on your caller ID, but it won't work the same way calling it back. But I get these calls all the time saying, you're going to be arrested if you don't pay this, or I've been threatened to be deported on calls, all kinds of things. You just be very, very mindful. Your bank, credit union, utility company will never call you and ask for your mobile or online account information, including your username or password. That's something we hear a lot is, well, I thought it was the credit union that called me and they asked me to verify my username because they said if I don't verify it, that I would lose access to my online and mobile access to my accounts. And that is a scam. It can be really convincing, again, because they have the phone number, they know that you're where you do your banking, but no one will ever call you asking for that information. Another really helpful way to reduce the likelihood of identity theft is removing those offers that you get in the mail that you didn't ask for loans. So like I mentioned, I've gotten those for people who used to live in the building before me. You are able to do something called opt out. So a lot of the time, if you look at your credit reports under inquiries, we talked about hard inquiries, soft inquiries. Hard inquiries impact your credit. It's when you apply for a loan. Soft inquiries can be promotional inquiries. So it might be you got an offer for an auto loan or a credit card or a variety of different things, car insurance with a different provider to help you save money. They look different depending on what offers you're getting in the mail. But all of those offers, the way that they're targeting you is they're pulling bulk credit report files and selecting the kind of consumer they want, paying for that information, and then sending it to you. And I will say that the more you have your social and all of your personal information from a credit file floating around in a business database, the more likely it is to be part of a data breach, right? If there's like 50 different companies that have your social security number on file, you're more likely to have that information get into the wrong hands than if you're just with like the 3 financial institutions you do business with. And so you can go to this website, optoutprescreen.com, or call the number, and you can opt out of receiving those unsolicited offers you did not ask for credit or loans, for 5 years or permanently. If you do it permanently online, it'll require you to print off a card and then sign it and mail it, but you can do the 5-year one online without having to do that extra step. Again, I do recommend that to minimize identity theft. And it doesn't mean that you don't qualify and can't apply for loans, credit cards, offers like that. You absolutely can. You just are not going to be given offers you didn't ask for. The exception to that is if you already do business with a company, so let's say you do your banking with a credit union or a bank, they can continue to send you offers because you already do business with them. But businesses that you have no relationship with would not be able to do that. Something that may be helpful, depending on your situation, is adding a security freeze or a fraud alert to your credit reports. Those are 2 means of protection that the credit bureaus offer. They do not negatively impact your credit scores, and they're typically free or low cost to add. They're free to add security freezes in the state of Colorado. There is sometimes a fee for lifting the freeze, though. And I'll just give you a brief overview of the difference. A fraud alert is kind of a suggestion, so it's not super secure way to lock down your credit report. That would say to somebody pulling your information, hey, this person is concerned about fraud or identity theft, and it gives your phone number to call and make sure that it's you applying for the loan or credit card. But here's the kicker. Is let's say the auto dealer does not actually have to call that number. It's just a suggestion. I don't fully understand why it's just a suggestion, but it is. A security freeze, on the other hand, means that nobody, including you, can pull your credit report without a 10-digit PIN. So if you wanted to apply for a car loan, a credit card, any type of loan at all, you would have to unfreeze, lift the freeze is the technical way of saying it, on your credit report by going to one of the credit bureau websites, lifting it, and then they could access your information. With that, you're issued a PIN. You want to keep that very safe and secure because if you lose that, you will not be able to unfreeze your credit. But that is kind of the Fort Knox ultimate way to lock down your credit report so people can't see it. In the state of Colorado, there is an exception. So again, businesses that you already have a banking relationship with would be able to pull it, for example, for account review. So almost every financial institution in their fine print, it'll say, we have the right to look every 6 months or every 12 months or whatever their policy is at your credit to see how you're doing and see what kind of offers we can send you. They would still have access, but nobody else would. Any questions on that in particular?
Yeah, just a comment. The credit freeze really does work. Recently, my wife got an unsolicited request to change her credit card through US Bank, and it was all legit, and it was better benefits and stuff. And so she applied for the card, but had forgotten that we had frozen both mine and her credit. And we got a letter from the credit bureau saying, or from the bank saying they couldn't process the application because of the credit freeze. So
right. So it worked as intended.
It did its job. Yeah.
Yeah. And they really do work. Again, the only downside I can think of is it might be a hassle, or you might forget about it. When I had my Equifax credit report frozen, I had the same experience where I was like, oh, I have to like remember to unfreeze this, right? When I need it. And you don't necessarily know which credit bureau a lender's going to use, but they will usually just let you know they're unable to process it. And it sounds like with your wife, you were able to process it. You just had to unfreeze it. But again, keeping that PIN code safe is really, really important so that you're able to lift that freeze. Yeah, thank you for sharing, Kevin. And if you all are curious, like the security freezes in Colorado, Equifax has waived their fees to remove them temporarily or permanently remove freezes because of their giant data breach. Experian, it's $10 if you want to permanently remove a freeze, $12 temporarily or permanently, remove a freeze. Also with Experian, if it's for a specific party, so in Kevin's example, if you wanted to lift it, but only for US Bank and nobody else, it would be $12. And then TransUnion, it's $10 for temporary lifts. Otherwise, it's free if you want to permanently remove it. So these are not really expensive services, and most people are not applying for credit all the time on a very regular basis. And security freezes are a really great option for people who have had their information compromised and just anyone who's concerned about it.
Sarah?
Yes.
Just to clarify on that, the freeze would not prevent someone from reporting bad credit, right?
No, unfortunately, that would be nice. If you could just freeze it the other way, where you're like, nothing negative can go on here. All of your businesses, whether it's positive information or negative information, can report to the credit bureaus, but they would not be able to pull your credit report for the purpose of giving a loan.
So just one other comment. We have also done the temporary lifting of a freeze, which is a convenient way. You get to pick, 2 days from now, I want the freeze to go back on or whatever. It gives whoever you're working with time to pull the credit report, and then you don't have to remember to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. The great observation. Did that answer the question, Daniel?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, especially since this will be in perpetuity, online.
Yeah. Good question. So taxes and social security numbers. Highly encourage you to respond quickly to legitimate notices from the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. Again, they will only mail you notices. That's the only way they'll contact you. But you might get something that says you've already filed your tax return and you have not filed your tax return. You want to contact their specialized identity theft protection unit. And I think an important note, which was something that was new to me when I learned it a few years ago, is that if someone filed taxes in your name, it's still really important that you file your taxes or pay taxes if you owe them, because even if someone did something fraudulent with your return, you can still be subject to a penalty or late fees if you don't file. So even if someone filed under your name, you would do a legitimate filing, and then they would work to get you your refund. Along with that, it's really helpful to file your taxes early to minimize the likelihood of experiencing tax fraud. So January 1st, a lot of employers don't get their W-2s that most people need to file taxes if they're working until the end of January, sometimes early February. But as soon as you have those documents, just knock out your tax return. There are a lot of free ways to file. There's a Tax Help Colorado is fantastic. They have sites across the state and across Metro Denver. You can drop off your paperwork. Right now it's contactless, but you can drop it off and they can help you file, or they have tools online where you can file for free your federal and state return. And if you have questions about specific things, they'll walk you through it. It's a great nonprofit free service. I caution people about tax preparation services. A lot of people will go to, H&R Block and those kinds of places, and they charge quite a bit of money. And you do not have to pay to file your taxes. You really don't. Most tax filing is pretty simple. Unless maybe you're a business owner or you own a lot of different types of investments and properties, then it can be more complicated and you might want to consult a tax professional. But I find that the resources through the library systems, nonprofits are very, very helpful. There's also the Denver Asset Building Coalition. All these nonprofits that I'm mentioning are in that financial coaching resource directory that we've shared in the past under taxes and tax assistance. So you can find those there. But yeah, unfortunately, some of the tax preparation services can be sketchy sometimes and really take advantage of people. So I might go file my taxes there. They charge me over $100 to do something I could have done for free with a nonprofit. And then they'll say, oh, well, we'll give you an advance on your tax refund. And it's a loan. So they'll say, oh, you don't want to have to wait for the IRS to direct deposit it. We'll give you your money right now. And while that does sound tempting, they charge a very, very high interest rate for that service. So it's really best to just do direct deposit directly through the IRS and find free tax filing assistance. And your social security number. So again, this is a very important number to be very careful and cautious with. And if someone asks you for it, ask, why do you need it? How will it be used? And how do you protect it, right? Is it just floating around in a database on a business that anyone can get to? Is it encrypted? What kind of security is being used? And sometimes you might ask these questions and someone will say, well, we don't actually need your full social. We just need the last 4. So just be very mindful about that, especially if you're unsure why it's needed. And next, I'm going to show you a short video about a really helpful federal resource for people who have experienced identity theft or are worried about scams or fraud. And I'm hoping the audio will work. If it does not, one of you just let me know.
It's not working, Sarah.
Oh, shoot. This happens sometimes. Okay, what I will do, it's a very, very short video, and it really just shows a website, which I have screenshots of because I was prepared for the audio to potentially not work. So I will send you guys a link to the video, but again, it really just covers some of the screenshots we'll see shortly. So what I was referencing is identitytheft.gov. You can also get to it by typing idtheft.gov, and this is the most user-friendly government website I have ever used. I was very pleasantly surprised when it was rolled out a few years ago. It's a great resource to help report identity theft step by step. Experiencing identity theft can feel really overwhelming. You don't know what to do first, who to contact. So this really breaks it down depending on what your situation is. And so this is also pulled from the website. So first you'll tell them what happened. They'll ask some questions. It'll help you with a recovery plan, step by step, exactly what to do for your personal situation. And then it'll give you some resources to put your plan into action. So you can create an account if you'd like. They'll go through the step-by-steps with you. You can update the plan as you need it, track progress. It has pre-filled in forms and letters that you can print out and mail directly from the website. It generates all of your documents in one place, which is great. So here's an example. So if I said, hey, something's going on, I go to this website. They have a chat support team too, as you can see in the upper right. And it'll ask you what the situation is. So I want to report identity theft, or someone filed a tax return with my info. My information was exposed in a data breach or something else. And then you select what it was. Okay, the identity theft opened a credit card, and it'll take you step by step through. It'll make an affidavit, which is submitted to your local police precinct, and it'll give you a recovery plan. So in this case, somebody had a Citibank account opened fraudulently. It'll say, call them to report it, place a fraud alert on your credit reports, review your credit reports for fraud, file a report with the police department, consider a security or a freeze on your reports. And even if you're not a victim of identity theft, it'll give you some information. So if something was lost or exposed, like your social security number, online login, you can click on any of these and it'll tell you exactly what to do to make sure that you don't become a victim of identity theft just because some of this information was compromised. All right. And the homework this time is pretty simple. So just apply one tip or strategy from the training to further safeguard your sensitive information and reduce your likelihood of experiencing fraud. We heard a great example earlier. So like not carrying a social security card in your wallet. So I'm curious to hear what you all will apply. And I want to be mindful of your time and stop presenting. Like Daniel said, I can always go on and on and on with this information. I really do try to minimize it. I cut a lot of slides today. I was like, today I'm going to wrap up early, but I'm sorry, it still went 2 minutes over.
Okay, thank you for tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you all. Have